I think we might have talked about space junk before, but there was this article on the ABC site that I saw, and it was really the graphic that caught my attention. There's like a little GIF on there, or GIF, however you want to pronounce it, of all the space junk orbiting the Earth currently, and it was quite disturbing, I thought, looking at it like that. It's not something you think about. I mean, the obvious joke to me is, we've had our fill of, throwing garbage around on the planet. Now we have to throw it out in outer space. And now they've gotten to the extent of launching a new satellite. They're calling it a giant Pac-Man, which effectively will go into orbit and start gobbling up all of this space junk to start clearing it out, because it's actually becoming a problem. And if they want to launch more missions out there, they've basically got to clear the way for it. And some of the numbers, though, are ridiculous that I was reading here. It was something like so nearly 2,000 live satellites in space at the moment, and more than 3,000 failed ones.
Yeah.
That's like, you don't even think, like, that's what, over the course of 20 plus, or what, about 70 years or so, we've been able to put that much stuff up there.
Yeah, that's right. But most of those satellites, for instance, have gone up in the last 15 or 20 years. So
yeah,
it's amazing. What I find most exciting about this story is, one, it's a space industry. This is now, being done because we want lots of people in space, and we need to create the space. We need to clean up the junk that we've left up there. The big question is, what are they going to do with that junk? Is it just going to burn up? Or is someone going to be a bit more clever and just trash it on the moon, and then in the future they'll be able to melt it down
and reuse it,
and reuse it? Yeah, recycle it. I wouldn't be burning it up. I'd be collecting it, and from low Earth orbit, trying some little tricks there, probably to get it out into lunar orbit.
So I mean that's a lot of material that they could use. Yeah, I mean.
Well, it costs a lot of money to get a kilogram of weight into space, or kilogram of mass, I should say, into space. So, it's already up there. You don't have to relaunch it, and it's full of all these great alloys that we need for space travel and life in space. It's all space-grade materials. So, it would make a lot of sense to scoop it up and, find a way to tow it out deeper into space, and then potentially reuse it.
And hopefully there's a crack team working on that as we speak. If hopefully this Pac-Man satellite can, do some of that, or at least get rid of some things that aren't working or whatnot. And then there's the other component of the private sector, I guess, coming in to do some of this too. So I'm not 100% sure, but I'm guessing the last 15 to 20 years, a lot of that might have been private. Some of that might have been private that had gone up in terms of satellites and stuff.
A lot of the communication satellites, yeah.
So,
but of course, there's going to be more and more satellites now, and with increased capability. And so, but there's whole networks up there that failed or just never worked quite properly, and they just left them there. So that's what a lot of these dead satellites are.
Isn't that something that they would have to build into any future satellites that get put up there? That I'm presuming that none of these things last forever, and they have to figure out an end-of-life strategy for some of this stuff. Maybe they didn't think about that earlier because it was just a colossal sort of undertaking to get one up there in the first place.
That's right. So in the past, and this is the philosophy, that typically pervades our civilization to this point, which is you take, make, and dispose. And the plan always has been, in the past, when the satellite gets to the end of its life, it'll just drop down and burn up in the atmosphere. But, the reality is you might have spent a few $1 million getting your payload into space. And not only that, the satellite didn't come cheaply either. That's tens of millions.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you take? It's up there. You don't have to relaunch it. You don't have to remake it. You just need to get it somewhere where it can be reprocessed or repurposed. And we're seeing more of that circular thinking now in everything we do with, say, water systems, which recycle and reuse, battery storage, the whole idea that you can keep these cycles or cyclic use of energy and resources. And so if the resource is there in space, it makes sense not to let it burn up, but to catch it and reuse it or find a way to reuse it.
And I guess just finally too, if they can find a way, and this wouldn't just be for creating satellites, I guess it could be creating any sort of tech that would be used in space, is to find a way to actually create it in space as opposed to actually doing it on Earth. But that obviously requires the creation of a technology to do that. I mean, I think I can't remember what it was. Was it? I can't remember what it was. We talked about it on a previous episode. It's sort of like a space lift that goes up into space, and that sort of thing. Hopefully that's being worked on as well. I would have thought that if you just get that in place, it solves a lot of problems and would also save a lot of money as well.
Oh, look, yeah, I agree. And I think, if you consider the motivation of the space race, which was to get at space, get into the moon at whatever cost, and that includes, waste. Yeah. You need to waste it to get there, then it's no big deal. But as we move into space, we know the dangers of junk. I was going to say, if anyone who's seen Gravity would appreciate that. We know the dangers of junk, and not, just the fact that we don't like waste anymore really in this planet. We realise the error of our ways. As you've just pointed out, it's a resource. So if you can reuse it in space, you don't have to take it there. You don't have to build it in space. So I think you'll see the focus now for really for space exploration is creating closed loop systems where everything is used and reused. Yeah. You can't afford to take extra weight. Yeah. You can't afford to dispose of anything because you've worked so hard to get it with you. So the idea of then, say, leaving waste on Mars, well, really the idea should be whatever you have to leave behind on Mars, the next person will be able to use. Yep, absolutely. And that includes the rovers. So I can well imagine that when we eventually get to Mars, someone will be able to refurbish and, get maybe the rovers going back again. Who knows? Or at the very least, put it in a museum somewhere on Mars that tourists can visit. I love it, Ben. I love it. You're thinking.